Hey there, good evening and welcome to Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show. So this is the part 2 of the two-part look back at classic albums. I lumped these two albums together so I could talk about both of these two bands. I really dig both of the bands. They're not among my favorite bands, but they had big impact on me as a young man, directing me towards music, and of course they had huge influence on a lot of bands and music, which then had influence on bands that I really like. So today we're going to be talking about the second half of this, which is the Rolling Stones. When the Beatles came out, the Stones were the bad boys, but they were the 1-2 punch that put the British invasion on the map. Both bands had huge success in different ways, and their music is not really much of a like, really. Pete Townsend once said that he didn't care much for the Beatles, but he really loved the Stones. He also said that the Who couldn't write the kind of music that the Beatles were doing, but they would blow them away on stage. And I'm not disagreeing with either of those statements. I'm just saying that that's how these two bands impacted different people. Okay, so today we're doing an album that actually not one of their earlier albums, but an album that had an impact on me because it came out right around that same period of time when I started to branch out from Kiss and started to get into other music. And one of the bands that people started pushing on me was my cousin, and a few other people who started pushing on me was the Rolling Stones. And the album that had just come out that year was this one, Some Girls. Came out that summer, actually. Released on June the 9th, 1978. 40 minutes in length, and was produced by the Glimmer Twins. Now, I don't find any references to who they're referring to, other than I would have to say they talked about Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. You know, maybe I'm wrong here. If I am, somebody please correct me. I hate being stupid that way. Okay, and the album, the studio they did this album in was called the Pathy Marconi, which was in Paris. Okay, featured on the album, the members of the Rolling Stones, Mick Jagger, vocals, some guitar, some piano, some percussion. Keith Richards, vocals and backing vocals. He did do lead vocals on one particular song, and I'll get into that later. Guitar, he did a little bass and a little piano as well. Ronnie Wood, who had come over from the Faces, and Rod Stewart, and by this time had been in the band for a while and was a major contributor, doing most of the lead guitar stuff, and did some bass and some pedal steel and some bass drum on this album as well. Bill Wyman, who was the bass player and did some synthesizer, probably bass synthesizer. And then, of course, the drummer, the late, great Charlie Watts on the drums. Okay, so this is a fantastic album. When I first got this album, and I got it fairly early when it came out, so it was probably about the end of the summer of 1978. It's one of the first dozen or so albums I had, not before Styx or Sabbath or Rush or Queen. Those albums I already had, or was getting into those bands already, but I got this album pushed on me, and at first I loved some of the tracks quite a bit, and other songs on it I couldn't stand. That's just the way it was. I wasn't a country western person. I didn't really like disco at all, and there's a little bit of both of those elements on this album. Yes, it's a rocking album. It's some pretty heavy rocking stuff by the Stones too, but it had those little bits of those elements on it. So we're going to talk a little bit about this album. And you know, to me, the Stones were kind of the opposites of the Beatles, although they both had tremendous fame. And at that point in time, I would have to say they were arguably 1-2 from the 60s. Although by the time this album came out, Led Zeppelin and the Who, I think, were probably the top two bands at that point in time. And anyways, we'll talk about this album a bit. So on this album, there are, you have to look inside because it's kind of written all over the album. It's kind of like these ads they used to have in the 60s. or 70s, like little bra ads and face ads, just pictures of them in girls' clothing and stuff. It's kind of different. Anyways, I'll take the disc out and show you just what I'm talking about. There's the album cover, a couple of pictures on the inside. Very 60-ish style, right? Like a lot of these pictures are in here. And I think that's Charlie Watts and Bill Wyman with lipstick on. So maybe the beginning of something different. And then, of course, the same. Richards and Jagger. Don't see any pictures of Ron Wood. I guess he wasn't into that. Anyways, and then there's the backside of this album as well. Okay, so the songs on this album are songs I like. Over time, each song has had an impact on me, some more than others. And the songs I didn't initially like on the album, they grew on me. Because I think when you listen to a music after a while, you start, this little prejudice that you might have against music start to disappear a bit. So the first song on this album is Miss You, of course. It's the monster hit. Kind of a disco-y song, but kind of catchy too. I didn't like it initially, but it did well on the charts, and then later I began to like it quite a bit. When the Whip Comes Down, that's a pretty heavy song. I always liked that one right from the beginning. Just My Imagination. Yeah, another really good song, underrated song. I would call that more of a deep cut. Some Girls, of course, which is the title track of the album, fantastic song. It had a little bit of part in it that might be not really loved by your parents. I tried to hide it when sometimes they would talk about some of the things they talk, because my mother and them wouldn't have wanted to hear that. Lies, another good cut. Faraway Eyes, that's the kind of country track on it that I wasn't a big fan of country, but I don't mind this song too much. It's pretty actually kind of funny. It's a funny song actually. A little bit of humor in the song. Respectable, great tune. Before They Make Me Run. Now I want to say that was the song that, without looking, I have to look and see, but I believe that is the track that Keith Richards does the vocals on. He has a very nasally kind of voice. I don't see anything to indicate it. It's a nice book, but it doesn't really tell you much. Anyways, I'm pretty sure that's the song though that he does the vocal track on. Lead vocal track on. I think it's the only song that Keith doesn't, that Mick doesn't do on the album. Beast of Burden, fantastic song. Not only is it one of the great songs in this album, it's one of my all-time favorite Stone songs and one of my top 100 songs of all time too. Fantastic song. And then of course there's the unshakably heavy street kind of song in Shattered, which I think was also released as a single. I think they had Miss You. Let me see if I can remember here. They had, Miss You, Some Girls, Shattered, and Beast of Burden. I think those were the 4 tracks that kind of had singles put out there, 45s that is. That really doesn't happen nowadays. Mostly they just release stream stuff on internet and people pick it up, and then they get enough interest, they'll put out an album. Anyways, there you go. Some Girls by the Rolling Stones. They're not a fan. Neither of the 2 bands I did were fantastic instrumentalists. They're not what I would call like gifted musically. No, that's probably an incorrect term to say. They're probably not gifted instrumentally. Musically, I think they're both quite gifted. They know how to write and put catchy songs together. They know how to make music. They know how to appease the public. They're great that way. Both of them. The Stones were probably a little better live, but it was a nice kind of rivalry that produced a lot of really good stuff. So there you have it. Some Girls by the Rolling Stones. I think I got this thing backwards. it's backwards. There it is. Some Girls by the Rolling Stones, released in 1978. So I hope you enjoyed this video and would like me to do more of these kind of videos, maybe do some more Stone stuff. If you liked it, please like at the bottom. And subscribe if you'd like me to do more Stones or more stuff like this. Anyways, this is Prog Monster. Murph out. Have a good evening. Bye.